Welcome to the Great Divorce Podcast, hosted by divorce financial analyst and retirement planning counselor Andrew Hatherley. Join Andrew and guest experts as they help late-life divorcees build the financial and mental foundation for a meaningful future. There is life after divorce. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Today, gray divorce meets silver divorce. What does that mean? What's the difference? Well, we'll get into that and a lot more things today because my guest is Lisa McCluskey. Lisa is the host of the Silver Divorce podcast, which went live in March 2024. So happy first year anniversary, Lisa.
Thank you. Yes.
Like me, Lisa went through a divorce later in life and decided to start a podcast to educate and inspire other folks going through this phenomenon of mid to late life divorce. By the way, I was honored to be a guest on the Silver Divorce podcast. That was episode number 32, I believe, which is out there in the interwebs.
Yes.
So please check that out. Lisa has a very interesting story, and I'm sure you're going to all enjoy this conversation. Lisa, welcome to the Great Divorce Podcast.
Well, hello, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're very welcome. And before we get to the good stuff of your story and learn about your podcast, is there a difference between silver and gray divorce? I kind of thought they were the same thing.
They are the same thing, just a different terminology. I decided to name mine Silver Divorce, not only because of the age of people going through divorce, they're in their silver years, but I believe there can be a silver lining after divorce. So for me, it was somewhat of a double entendre.
I like that, silver lining.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly share that sentiment about the potential we all have for improved lives after going through this transition. And I mean, I just define it as over 50 years of age, divorce over
Yes.
50 years of age. And most of my gray or silver was earned during my 9-month divorce process. So
Yeah, that's true. And that's very similar. I say 50 years of age and in a long-term marriage. And all courts, they describe long-term as 10 years or more. So most of the people who are listening, they have been married for decades, and they just have a lot of their own unique challenges, not only, as you know, financially in divorce, but the emotional aspects of divorce. So.
definitely, for sure. So, Lisa, we both have our divorce stories.
Yes.
I told you mine on your show a couple of weeks ago. So now it's your turn. Now it's your turn.
Okay.
What's your story that led you to this podcast?
Oh gosh. So I retired in 2021, and I was an executive for a healthcare system. Had a very busy career, and then suddenly I retired. Well, retirement has its own unique challenges. You somewhat enter into an identity crisis. You're not anybody's boss anymore. You're not mentoring anybody. You're not responsible for projects. And on top of that, you're thrown into the house together with somebody that, you didn't have a 24-hour-a-day relationship with. You had times when you were out of the house and had independence, and suddenly you don't have any independence. You're joined at the hip, trying to figure out what to eat every day. And, that can create strain on marriages. And for us, it did create some strain. And while we had a 34-year marriage, and in that time frame, you can ebb and flow in your marriage. I thought we were getting to the other side. We were figuring it out, but my husband had other ideas. So he took the step of filing for divorce, and it was just, it was a bombshell. They talk about the divorce bomb. Well, that whole experience of trying to figure out what's going to happen next, how is it going to happen, what are my rights, really led me to understand not only the explosion of gray divorce in the community. It's actually now 1 in 3 divorces today are with people over the age of 55 and 1 in 4 with people over the age of 65. So I became to understand how prevalent it is. But then as I dug in, I also understood how big the knowledge gap was, how most people just did not know what their rights were or how to proceed, where to turn next. So as I did my research and began to develop tools for myself to get through the divorce. And once I was on the other side, I thought, there's really some tools that I've developed that could help other people. And ironically, my attorney, she said, "You're probably the most well prepared client I've ever had. Would you consider coaching my clients?" So I
Wow.
thought, well, maybe there's something to that. And I, having a background in marketing and communications, I've always believed that we are given gifts by God, and our gift back to Him is to use those gifts to help others. So that's what led me to start the Silver Divorce podcast.
Well, so many things there really resonate
Yeah.
with me. First of all, the discussion of how this came about after you retired and you were thrown together with your spouse. I mean, you were obviously a very hard-charging, conscientious corporate executive, and now you're at home. And I actually did a podcast on this. We call it crowded house syndrome, not empty nest where the kids
Oh,
necessarily leave, but the crowded house.
yes.
And you found
It,
that certainly played out in your marriage, huh?
Oh, absolutely. And I was invading his space and I was, changing his routines because he had already retired. He had been retired for a number of years. So he had his routines and his space. And suddenly here I was every day. And when you are busy raising kids, as oftentimes happens in marriages, you're raising kids, you do tend to drift apart. You might have your own interests, don't have as many interests together as a couple. And then there you are face to face every day. Where are you going? When will you be back? What are we going to do today?
Yeah.
And you feel as though you have to be the travel planner for your life every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is an added stress that so many
Yeah.
couples aren't prepared for. I'm curious, you talked about how you educated yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly that's probably the main thrust of my work with people before and during divorce is to get educated about the process. I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, what were the key lessons that you learned going through your divorce? I suppose the big lesson was get educated. Anything in particular that you really struck you?
Well, one of the things, the biggest thing I learned is that you have to be your own advocate. One of the things that I did is I went and watched every continuing education video by attorneys for attorneys I could find so I could understand their thought processes, how do divorce attorneys think, what tools are they using. And I just wanted to put myself in their world because my divorce was a contested divorce and so very contentious. And I wanted to know, how can I prepare myself to be my own advocate? Because your attorney is an expert in family law. Your attorney is not a therapist. Your attorney is not a financial advisor. And I can't stress that enough. They're not financial advisors and they are not tax attorneys. So many of the decisions that you need to make, you have to take into consideration not only what are the emotional results of this decision, like keeping the house, but what are the tax implications? And those are the things that you need to do your research on or get with another expert to help you make those decisions. So really the biggest lesson is nobody's going to care about the outcome of your divorce more than you. So be your own best advocate. And then I would say, the second thing is be prepared for a settlement mindset. Mine was a contested divorce, and in my state, in Tennessee, like many states, they require mediation before you go to trial. So only about 2% of cases go to trial. So if you can go into a divorce with a mindset of we are going to settle, you will have, first of all, you'll save a lot of attorney's fees because if it's a litigious attorney or very hotly contested, there's going to be a number of filings. And every time your attorney goes to court and issues a subpoena, there's a cost to that. And at the end of the day, how much money do you want to spend fighting over property? Property, what I have seen where they can spend, lose $10,000 to fight over $2,000 worth of property. So really approach it from a settlement mindset. In the United States, about 95% of cases are settled. They don't go to trial. So don't go into it with a mindset of, I'm going to trial and I'm going to show the world that this is a bad human being. And because that doesn't happen. It's not going to happen, and you'll spend a lot of money on your attorneys trying to do that.
Yes, you're so right. So many people do approach it as I'll show him and the world will see. We need to be looking forward here. And
Right.
this is likely the largest financial transaction in our lives. And the emotions that come up, the resentment, the anger, they're not going to serve you well in getting through this process. And if you don't have, as you mentioned, a settlement-minded attorney, sometimes you need a litigious attorney, if there's legal issues involved or abuse, that sort of
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
But if those aren't there, you want to try and get your divorce done in as amicable a way as possible. So as not to enrich the attorneys and keep the
Right.
fee and keep the assets to yourself, but also to preserve your emotions as well going through the process and reduce the whole stress of it. And what you say about being your own advocate is so important. I phrase it as being the quarterback of your divorce team. And the more involved you are in advocating for yourself, and the more reasoned you are and educated about the process, the more powerful an advocate you can be. And honestly, if you're show that resolve to look after your interests, you're going to keep the other professionals on their toes as well. And
Yes.
and you're also going to make their job easier because if you prepare, for instance, your financials in a neat, organized spreadsheet and get them to your attorney quickly and correctly, you're going to save them a lot of time. And honestly, you're going to be a person that they're happy working with, and it's going to energize the process for your benefit.
Yes. Yes. Actually, I had developed a spreadsheet and prepared it for my attorney. And that spreadsheet ended up being what the mediator used and what the opposing attorney used. So I was able to control that process. And, one of the other aspects of settlement is that a long, prolonged divorce process impacts the entire family. And you might think that your adult children aren't impacted by your divorce because they're out of the house, but they are greatly impacted. It affects all of the relationships around you. And the longer that your divorce drags out and the more acrimonious it is, and people tend to pull their adult children in and have conversations with them about what the other spouse is doing, the more those adult children feel that pain. So the family can't get to the other side and begin healing until you settle your divorce and do it in a way that is fair for everybody involved.
That's so important that you mentioned adult children. And I was going to ask you this later on, but I'll ask you now.
Mhm.
The most popular episode that I've done of the 65 episodes of the Great Divorce podcast is the impact of divorce on adult children. this is a crucially ignored issue out there because when you go to an attorney and you're getting divorced, typically one of the first questions they'll ask is, are there any minor children involved? And if you
Hmm.
say no, they'll move on next.
Right. Yeah.
They're completely ignored in the process. And it's not the attorney's work either. It's not going to be his work in the case. But ultimately, this is why it's important to have coaches and emotional counselors and family counselors involved if necessary, because the impact on adult children is profound.
It is. It makes them question their own relationship because oftentimes the adult children have been out of the house for a while and they don't see you every day. They don't even see that there are problems happening in the marriage. And suddenly, when you announce that you're divorcing, they're shocked. And so it makes them question their own relationships and what can happen in their own marriage. So I actually took my adult daughters to therapy with me. I wanted to hear from them how they were feeling about it and discovered some misconceptions that they had. And oftentimes, adult children feel blame. They will blame themselves, even though there's no way that they have any blame, but it's somewhat natural. So they start to think, oh, is it because the grandchildren were at your house too much and I put too much responsibility on you? Or, did we do something that caused you to argue? So I took my adult daughters with me to therapy session, and so we could get that all out on the table, and I could dismiss any misconceptions that they were having about the divorce. So as you said, that topic is hugely important, often overlooked, and it is something we need to be paying attention to, and how those adult children are feeling and what they're thinking and how we talk to them through the divorce process. They cannot be our best friends. They cannot be our counselors. That we still have to be the parents for those children.
Right. And you mentioned you took your adult child to the therapist. This is part of your being your own advocate and building a team of professionals because you don't want to involve your children in those issues of your divorce. You need to deal with an outside objective professional.
Yeah,
Same with your financials, same with the legal. And ultimately, and I've had this discussion quite a bit on the podcast, it's less expensive in the long run to have an emotional professional who may charge $150 an hour than rely on an attorney who's not an emotional
that's right.
professional to
Who's
every attorney,
charging
every attorney's
450
conference.
an hour?
I'm sorry.
I said the attorney who's charging $450 an hour.
And they all have exactly, and they all have
Yeah,
a box of tissues on their conference room table,
yeah,
but they're not qualified to deal with the emotional aspects or the financial aspects.
yeah.
As a financial advisor, I'm not qualified to deal with the legal aspects or the
That's
emotional
right.
aspects. And so,
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, what I try to tell people is, even though it's in a very emotional time, the most important thing you can do is try to treat it like a business transaction. Try to, if you've ever been refinishing furniture, I refinish furniture as a hobby. And when you're dealing with combustible rags, you put them in a metal lid and in a metal can and you put the lid on it. I tell people, take those combustible emotions when you're looking at the process of your divorce, put them in that metal can and put a lid on it, because you have to proceed as though this is a business transaction, because it affects the rest of your life, especially if you're retired and you don't have time to make up for the money that you're losing in the divorce. It's not easy to go back to work. So you have to look out. You have to consider, where am I going to be in 2 years? Where am I going to be in 5 years? What are my needs going to be? Treat it as though it's a business transaction.
That's a terrific approach, and I agree wholeheartedly. Lisa, your divorce occurred after you were already retired.
That's
With
right.
me, with
Yeah.
me, it was 7 years before I had projected my retirement. So we come at it from
Yeah.
different angles there. I'm
Right.
curious, you know, it's got to be a little scary when you're in retirement already and a little older. You're a little older when you got divorced than me.
Yeah.
Um, how did that affect your attitude towards retirement? Seeing I'm just assuming that your net worth dropped dramatically, and
Yes.
and you must have. Well, you tell me, how did it affect your attitude
Mhm.
towards retirement and your approach?
Well, I have no shame in saying I'm 68. So, going back to work would be a little challenging, even though in my profession I could consult and have other opportunities. It was a matter of, do I want to do that? Because I worked for 47 years. So I felt as though I earned my retirement. I will say the one thing that it has done has redefined my outlook on abundance. During the marriage, I was our financial person, did all of our investments, and every 6 months I would do the family net worth statement, and I would, take great pride in, oh, we're socking that money away, and we're getting ready. And then suddenly in divorce, where it is equal distribution, it does go to half. So you have to look at number one, does that define me? Because you can be very angry about that. You can be very bitter about that, and that can guide your whole life, being angry about the money. But at some point, you have to say the money's the money, and I'm redefining what abundance is peace, having peace in my life. That is abundance.
There's a
The
difference between rich and wealthy.
Right.
And I
Yes,
think I think you're equating abundance with real wealth.
that's right.
And I couldn't help but smile when you talked about your net checking your net worth spreadsheet every 6 months. I check mine quarterly. I update it quarterly. I think you're the sister I never had.
I probably am. It's
The
kind of,
Silver Divorce podcast, the spreadsheets. But I think the net worth statement was very important to me after my divorce in rebuilding at age 52 because I knew it would be a process and just checking checking in on that spreadsheet every quarter to see it going back and rebuilding was very important, and I recommend people going through divorce do that as well. But as you say,
yeah,
it does cause you to divorce in retirement or even approaching retirement does cause you to rethink wealth and abundance.
it
And
does. Andrew, and I recommend that people go back to their financial advisor because you might think that your situation is dire because of where you were and where you are now. I read on average, women experience a 45% decrease in their standard of living. But if you go back to your financial advisor who can work with you and really lay out your finances, that's very valuable because you might be thinking, oh, I'm broke now. But once you meet with your financial advisor, she'll say, you have enough money to live till you're 99. If you're this, she'll reframe it, or he will reframe for you your standing and offer many suggestions and opportunities to help you. So don't go into a panic mode. Seek help as part of your team. Seek help post divorce.
I think with that reframing of what's abundance and what's wealth going through divorce, you can speak to your financial advisor and hopefully he or she is a person. There's a new developments in financial advising where it's called life-centered planning, and people look more at what brings you happiness, what brings you joy.
That's right.
And some of these things don't cost anything. Most of these things don't cost anything or
Mhm.
cost far less than the things people think will bring them joy, like the $100,000 car or the $2
That's
million
right.
dollar house. So you can have these discussions with the financial advisor, and you can find that, hey, I can live a purposeful, meaningful life, and maybe I don't have as much money now, but maybe I can rebuild and um, enjoy the process. And if it requires a peek every quarter at your net worth spreadsheet, see that you're increasingly solvent and whatever works.
Yeah, because truthfully, when I hit 50, that's really when I realized, oh my gosh, I have 15 years left. And even though I had started at 21 with my first IRA, I really hit the accelerator at 50. And I look back on, the things that we perhaps didn't do because we were trying to sock away as much money for that golden retirement and didn't have those vacations that we'd like to or those experiences because we were waiting for the golden years.
Right.
Looking back, when after you split it and you lose half, you think maybe I should have taken those vacations sooner because there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that you get to those golden years. So really is something that teaches you a lot about what's important in life, where what you're able to live on, how you can have as you said, a rich life with the money that you have, but what do you value? What's the most important thing to you? What do you value most? And to me, I value being at peace and living a very balanced life and seeking joy, choosing to seek joy every day.
Amen, Lisa. 100%
Yeah.
agree. 100%
Yeah.
agree. So the podcast, the
Yes.
podcast. So you're in your 60s. I was 59 when I started my podcast. I think you were a little older. What is it? 60-year-old starting podcasts.
I know it.
How did that happen? And how's the experience been in the just over a year that you've been doing it?
Oh gosh. Well, it's been a wonderful experience because I have gotten to meet some incredible people that are just they have changed their lives after they went through their own divorce, much like you. Most all of my guests made a career shift after they went through a very traumatic divorce, and their passion is helping other people. And that was really what I wanted to do was help people avoid some of the pitfalls I fell into. So it's gone extremely well. I'm now rated on Listen Notes, and it's globally in the top 10% of podcasts. So that's been a wonderful blessing to be able to reach so many people. Right now, it's available on all of the podcasting, Apple, Spotify, the Pocket Casts. It's on a wide network so people can find it, and has 34 episodes now that have dropped.
Terrific. And as I do, that not many people who start out podcasting make it to 33, 34 episodes.
No, actually 50% drop out after 6 episodes and only 10% make it a year. So 90% of podcasts that are started are gone within a year. So
That's
it,
incredible.
it truly is. But most people don't understand the amount of work that goes into a podcast. But there's tremendous satisfaction and value if you can be consistent, stick with it, and you start to help people and you start to hear from those people who've been helped by what you're putting out there. So it's great.
This is what we're talking about. You something adding purpose and meaning to your life. You mentioned you work with furniture, you have family,
Yeah.
you've got the podcast. All these things are so important, and
Yeah.
they're not expensive things.
That's right.
But they give your life
Yes.
meaning.
They do, and I've been very fortunate to have two sponsors now, Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics and Medicare Misty, who believe strongly in what is happening with the podcast, believe strongly in helping people going through divorce. So that has been something that has allowed me to continue to have a professional production and continue to excel with the show.
I'm curious. I mentioned a moment ago that the most popular podcast episode of my 64 so far is my conversation with Carol Hughes, who wrote a book about the impact of divorce on adult children.
Mhm.
What are the two or three most popular episodes of your podcast?
Well, the most popular one is the divorce identity crisis with life coach Holly Holloway, because that is something that affects everybody going through the divorce. After decades of marriage, they look back and they say, who am I? I'm not a wife. I don't have to be a mother in the traditional sense. My children are grown. Who am I? What am I going to do? How am I going to create a new life? So that remains our top episode. The second one is managing finances before and during divorce, because you have many people who the other spouse was in charge of the finances. There
Right.
are a lot of people that don't even know what they have. They have no idea what they have. So they're trying to come up to speed and learn, how do I find this information? What's important for me to know? So that's the second one. And the third one is another emotional topic, and that is on boundaries and standing in your power. How do you create boundaries so that you're not a pushover for your spouse? They're very assertive and perhaps narcissistic spouses, and they want to, push their way onto you. So how can I start to stand in my power when I'm not used to it? It's not normal for me. What are some strategies to do that? So that's my third top episode.
The discussion of boundaries is an important discussion in both going through life and in divorce particularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I did an episode recently with somebody who's a specialist in that regard, and thus far it's proving to be a very popular episode also. So there's some commonalities there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, what you're doing is inspiring. To adopt this new technology later in life, but and hopefully another 30, 40 years beyond, but um, to to do something new and to learn something new is I think a great inspiration for others. And I'm wondering, what's been your inspiration along your journey?
I will have to say the guests that I've had on, incredible people who, as I mentioned, they have completely shifted their career focus after going through their own divorce. And they are passionate about helping people through the journey. So even some therapists that I've interviewed, they went into therapy after their own divorce just so they could help people. And that has been incredibly inspiring, because they're not necessarily doing it um, for, hordes of money. Um, Even though that is their full-time profession, they're not doing it with the mindset, I'm going to do this and get rich. They're doing it with the mindset that people need help, and I want to be there for them. And that to me is incredibly inspiring.
It is inspiring, and it's funny how we get more fulfillment when we do get outside our own headspace and we
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about how we can be of better service and better value to others. I know with my financial advisory practice, when I started focusing on people emerging from gray divorce, I just felt that it was adding a lot of value, and ultimately
Yes.
that made my work more meaningful, and I expected that I was going to retire a couple of years ago, and I'm not thinking, why? I feel great, and my work has value and meaning. Let's keep doing it.
That's all you can ask for, is to have your work have value and meaning. And as long as you're passionate about it, it's not a job. It really isn't. So,
Terrific, Lisa. Well, it's been
yeah,
such a pleasure having you on the
thank
Gray
you.
Divorce podcast, the Silver Divorce podcast. Where can you're out there? I'm sure you're not hard to find, but to just
Yeah,
remind our listeners how they
sure.
can.
Silver Divorce Podcast is on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Pandora, Pocket Casts, babyboomer.org, any of the podcasting apps. It's out there even on SiriusXM. So just search for Silver Divorce Podcast and we'll pop up.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Gray Divorce Podcast. To learn more or get in contact with your host, you can visit Andrew's website at transcendretirement.net. Also, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Information provided is educational only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Each situation is unique and should be discussed with your tax or legal advisor prior to implementation. Andrew Hatherley is not an attorney and does not provide legal advice. Information provided is financial in nature. Advisory services offered through Hatherley Capital Management, LLC. Divorce financial analysis services offered through Wiser Divorce Solutions, an affiliated company.